I never thought a camping trip would change my life. But there I was at 2 in the morning, lying completely still while my best friend's fingers traced circles on my bare shoulder, both of us pretending to be asleep even though we knew better. Let me back up. Marcus had been my roommate for 8 months. We'd met through a housing app, both of us desperate to escape expensive studio apartments in the city. He was a graphic designer, I worked in marketing, and we got along in that easy way where you can sit in comfortable silence or talk for hours about nothing important. He had this habit of leaving coffee pods scattered across the kitchen counter, and I never put my shoes away properly, but somehow it worked. We'd developed this rhythm, you know? Tuesday movie nights, Sunday morning runs, the occasional beer on the balcony after a long week, just two guys sharing space and rent, nothing complicated. Then his company announced their annual team-building retreat. 3 days camping in the mountains, mandatory attendance, and Marcus looked absolutely miserable about it. I found him one evening, staring at the email on his laptop, his dark eyebrows pulled together in this worried expression that made him look younger than his 28 years. "You okay?" I asked, dropping my gym bag by the door. He glanced up, running a hand through his black hair. "Yeah, just this work thing. They want us to go camping, like actual camping, tents and everything." I laughed. "You've never been camping, have you?" "Is that obvious?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm a city kid, man. The closest I've gotten to nature is Central Park, and even that feels like pushing it sometimes." I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat down at our small dining table. "It's not that bad. I used to go all the time with my dad before he passed. It's actually pretty peaceful once you get used to it." Marcus looked at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. "They're making us share tents, 2 people per tent, and I don't really know anyone there that well yet. I've only been with the company 6 months." Something in his voice made me pay closer attention. There was an edge of real anxiety there, not just the usual complaining we all do about work obligations. Marcus was confident in most situations, the kind of guy who could charm clients and navigate office politics with ease. But this had him genuinely rattled. "What if," I said slowly, the idea forming as I spoke, "I came with you? Would they allow a +1 or something?" His eyes widened. "You'd do that? But it's your weekend too, and it's 3 days, and I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking, I'm offering. Besides, I could use a break from the city, and someone needs to make sure you don't try to start a fire with wet wood or something equally disastrous." The relief on his face was immediate and genuine. "Really? God, that would actually be amazing. Let me check with my boss." He was already typing an email, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "I think they'd be cool with it. They keep talking about how these retreats are supposed to build community and connections or whatever." That's how I found myself 2 weeks later, packed into Marcus's sedan with a borrowed tent and sleeping bags, heading up a winding mountain road with a dozen other cars full of his co-workers. The company had rented out a campground, complete with bathroom facilities and fire pits, so it wasn't exactly roughing it, but Marcus still looked nervous as we pulled into the gravel parking area. "This is fine," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "People do this all the time, totally normal." I grabbed our gear from the trunk. "You're going to be fine. I promise camping is like 90% just sitting around talking and eating, and you're great at both those things." We found our assigned spot, a relatively flat area near a cluster of pine trees. Other tents were already going up around us, and I could hear laughter and music starting to drift through the air. Marcus's co-workers seemed like a decent bunch from what I'd seen during the drive up, mostly people in their 20s and 30s, casual and friendly. "Okay," I said, dropping our bags. "First lesson in camping, setting up the tent. It's easier than it looks, I promise." It wasn't easier than it looked, at least not with Marcus helping. He managed to get the poles tangled twice, nearly took out my eye with a tent stake, and at one point somehow got his shirt caught on the rainfly. I was laughing so hard I could barely breathe, and eventually he started laughing too, that genuine belly laugh that I'd only heard from him a handful of times. "I'm terrible at this," he admitted, sitting back on his heels. "You're learning. Here, hold this pole steady while I secure this corner." We finally got the tent up, a little crooked but functional. Marcus crawled inside to check it out, and I heard him moving around, testing the space. When he emerged, he had a strange expression on his face. "It's smaller than I thought," he said. He wasn't wrong. The tent was a standard two-person model, which meant it would fit 2 sleeping bags with maybe 6 inches between them. We'd be closer than we'd ever been in our apartment where we each had our own rooms and personal space. "We'll make it work," I said, trying to sound casual. "I've shared smaller tents with my cousins. You just kind of get used to it." That first evening was actually great. Marcus's company had organized a big communal dinner, burgers and hot dogs cooked over an open fire, and people were genuinely welcoming. They asked about me, included me in conversations, and didn't make it weird that I was just the roommate who'd tagged along. Marcus relaxed as the night went on, the tension leaving his shoulders as he joked with his team and helped clean up after dinner. We stayed up late around the fire, someone had brought a guitar, and the conversation flowed easy with the help of beer and the peaceful darkness of the forest around us. I watched Marcus in the firelight, the way the orange glow caught the angles of his face, how he threw his head back when he laughed. I'd seen him hundreds of times, but something about this setting made me notice details I'd overlooked, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners, the grace in his hands when he gestured while talking, the comfortable way he'd shifted closer to me on the log we were sharing, our thighs touching. When we finally headed back to our tent around midnight, I felt that flutter of nervousness I'd been pushing down all day. We'd be sleeping in close quarters, and suddenly that felt significant in a way I couldn't quite name. Marcus crawled in first, fumbling with his flashlight. "Okay, so how do we do this?" I followed him in, zipping the tent closed behind us. "Just roll out your sleeping bag, get comfortable. It's pretty straightforward." But as we both started arranging our sleeping bags, the reality of the space became obvious. We were going to be right next to each other, close enough to feel each other's body heat, close enough to hear every breath. Marcus sat back, looking at the arrangement. "This is cozy." "Too cozy?" I asked, trying to read his expression in the dim light of the flashlight propped in the corner. "No, just different." He paused, then reached into his bag and pulled out a bandana. "My sister used to do this thing when we had to share a bed as kids. She'd make a line down the middle with whatever she could find. Said it kept things fair." He laid the bandana down the center of the tent, a bright red line between our sleeping bags. "There. You stay on your side, I'll stay on mine." I laughed, but something about the gesture felt loaded, like he was establishing a boundary we both knew was already blurry. "Whatever helps you sleep, man." We changed into sleeping clothes in the awkward confines of the tent, trying not to elbow each other, both of us pretending this was totally normal and not at all intimate. Marcus wore a faded college t-shirt and athletic shorts. I had on a tank top and sweatpants. We settled into our sleeping bags, and I turned off the flashlight, plunging us into darkness broken only by the faint moonlight filtering through the tent fabric. "This isn't so bad," Marcus said softly. "Thanks again for coming. I know I said it before, but seriously, you saved me." "Anytime. That's what friends do." Friends. The word hung in the air between us. We lay there in silence, listening to the sounds of the forest, the distant murmur of other campers settling in for the night. I was hyper-aware of Marcus next to me, the sound of his breathing, the rustle of his sleeping bag when he shifted position. "Can I ask you something?" His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Sure." "When you said you used to go camping with your dad before he passed, were those good memories?" I thought about it, about those trips into the wilderness with my father, just the two of us. "Yeah, they were. He wasn't great at the emotional stuff, you know. Didn't talk much about feelings. But out there, in nature, he'd open up. Tell me stories, give me advice. It was like the trees made it easier for him to be real." "That's nice," Marcus said. "My dad and I don't really have that. We talk, but it's all surface level. Work, weather, sports, nothing that matters." "Is that hard for you?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes. I think there are things I want to tell him, want to talk about, but I don't know how, and the longer I wait, the harder it gets." I wanted to ask what things, what he needed to say, but something in his tone told me he wasn't ready to go there. Not yet. "He's lucky to have you, even if he doesn't know how to show it." "Thanks, man." Another pause. "I'm glad we're roommates. I know that's random, but I am. Eh? You make things easier somehow." My heart did this weird skip thing in my chest. "Yeah, same here." We fell into silence again, but it felt different now, charged with something unspoken. I tried to sleep, but I was too aware of everything, the warmth radiating from Marcus's sleeping bag, the sound of his breathing gradually slowing as he drifted off, the way my own heart was beating just a little too fast. I must have eventually fallen asleep because I woke up to moonlight and the realization that something had changed. The tent felt warmer, closer, and Marcus had moved. The red bandana was still there, that line down the middle, but Marcus's arm had crossed it, stretched out in sleep until his hand was resting near my shoulder. Not touching, but close enough that I could feel the proximity. I held completely still, barely breathing. Was he awake? Was this intentional? His breathing seemed steady, the rhythm of sleep, but there was something about the way his fingers moved, just slightly, that made me wonder. Then his hand did touch me, just the lightest brush of fingertips against my bare shoulder where my tank top had shifted. It could have been an accident, the unconscious movement of sleep. But then it happened again, more deliberately, his fingers tracing a slow circle on my skin. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My entire body was focused on that single point of contact, those gentle circles his fingers were drawing. This was Marcus, my roommate, my friend, the guy who left coffee pods everywhere and sang off-key in the shower and had become one of the most important people in my life without either of us really acknowledging it. His hand moved higher, fingers ghosting along my shoulder blade, and I felt him shift closer. The sleeping bag rustled. I could feel his breath now, warm against the back of my neck. We were both pretending to be asleep, maintaining this fiction that let us explore whatever was happening without having to name it or face it in the harsh light of consciousness. His hand settled on my shoulder, no longer moving, just resting there with a weight that felt like a question. I didn't pull away. Instead, moving slowly, I shifted back just slightly, closing the last few inches between us. It was permission, or acknowledgement, or maybe just honesty about what we'd both been dancing around. Marcus's breath hitched, and I knew he was awake, had probably been awake this whole time. His hand moved again, sliding down my arm in a gesture that was unmistakably intentional, unmistakably intimate. My skin felt electric everywhere he touched. "We don't have to pretend to be asleep," I whispered, my voice barely audible. His hand stilled. For a moment I thought I'd ruined it, pushed too far too fast. Then he spoke, his voice rough and low. "I crossed the line." "Yeah, you did. Should I move back?" I turned over, shifting in my sleeping bag until I was facing him. In the dim moonlight, I could just make out his features, the uncertainty in his eyes, the way his lips were slightly parted. "Do you want to?" "No." The word came out almost desperate. "God, no, but I don't want to mess this up. Our friendship, our living situation, everything." I reached out, letting my hand find his face, my thumb brushing along his jaw. "What if it doesn't mess things up? What if it makes things better?" "How long have you—" He stopped, started again. "Is this just me? Have I been reading everything wrong?" "You're not reading it wrong." My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure he could hear it. "I think I've been trying not to see it, trying to keep things simple and safe, but, Marcus, nothing about how I feel about you is simple." He closed his eyes, leaning into my touch. "I was so scared to come on this trip. Not because of the camping, but because I knew we'd be sharing a tent. I knew I'd be close to you, and I didn't know if I could keep pretending I don't think about you constantly, that I don't notice everything about you. The way you hum when you're cooking, how you always give me the better seat on the couch, the fact that you make me laugh even when I'm having the worst day." "The bandana," I said, understanding. "You weren't making a line to keep me out. You were making it because you were afraid you'd cross it." "Yeah." He opened his eyes, and even in the darkness, I could see the vulnerability there, the fear and hope mixed together. "I crossed it anyway." "Good." I leaned in, closing the distance between us, and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, both of us still half afraid this was a mistake. But then Marcus made this sound, something between a sigh and a moan, and his hand came up to cup the back of my head, fingers threading through my hair, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home. We pulled apart, both breathing hard, and I could see Marcus smiling in the moonlight. "We're doing this," he said, like he was trying to convince himself it was real. "We're doing this," I confirmed. He laughed quietly. "In a tent, at my company retreat. I don't know if this is the worst timing ever or the best. Maybe it's just the right timing. I shifted closer, and he wrapped his arm around me, pulling me against his chest. We were tangled together now, the sleeping bags awkward around us, the red bandana crushed somewhere beneath us, the line completely erased. I don't want to go back to how things were, Marcus whispered against my hair. Even if this is complicated, even if we have to figure things out, I don't want to pretend anymore. Then we won't. I tilted my head up to kiss him again, slower this time, savoring it. We'll figure it out together. We stayed like that for a long time, holding each other, talking in whispers about everything we'd been holding back. Marcus told me about the first time he'd realized he was attracted to me, 3 months into living together when I'd helped him prepare for a big presentation and stayed up all night making sure he was ready. I told him about the morning I'd found him asleep on the couch, book fallen open on his chest, and realized I wanted to see that sight every morning for the rest of my life. We've been idiots, Marcus said, laughing softly. Probably, but we got here eventually. As the sky started to lighten with the first hints of dawn, we finally settled into sleep, still wrapped around each other, the boundary between us not just crossed but completely dissolved. I'd never felt more at peace, more certain of anything, than I did in that moment with Marcus's heartbeat steady beneath my ear. We woke up late, sunlight streaming into the tent, and had to scramble to get dressed and join the others for breakfast. If anyone noticed that we emerged from our tent together, still sleepy and clearly closer than we'd been the night before, they didn't say anything. But I caught one of Marcus's co-workers, a woman named Sarah, giving us a knowing smile. The rest of the retreat passed in a blur of activities and stolen moments. We hiked together, Marcus's hand finding mine on the trail when no one was looking. We roasted marshmallows and told stories around the fire, sitting close enough that our shoulders touched. And each night we returned to our tent, that red bandana still lying forgotten on the floor, and explored this new dimension of us. On the last morning, as we packed up the tent, Marcus held up the bandana. Should I keep this as a reminder? A reminder of what? That some lines are meant to be crossed. He folded it carefully and tucked it into his pocket. And that sometimes the scariest thing is also the best thing. The drive back to the city felt different. We held hands across the center console, music playing softly, both of us quiet with the weight of everything that had shifted. I knew we'd have things to figure out, conversations to have, logistics to manage. Living together would be different now, complicated in new ways. But as we pulled up to our apartment building and Marcus looked at me with that smile that still made my heart skip, I knew we'd figure it out. Because some things, the important things, they're worth the complexity, worth the risk, worth crossing every line you've ever drawn. We carried our bags upstairs, and as Marcus unlocked the door to our apartment, he turned to me. Home, he said simply. Yeah, I agreed, following him inside. Home. And it was, not just the apartment, but this, us, whatever we were building together. It had started with a line drawn down the middle of a tent, a boundary that was really just an invitation, a dare to be brave enough to cross it. And we had. We'd crossed it and found something on the other side that was worth every moment of uncertainty, every fear, every risk. That night, as we settled onto our couch for our usual Tuesday movie night, Marcus pulled the red bandana from his pocket and laid it on the coffee table between us. Then he immediately moved it aside, closed the distance between us, and kissed me like he'd been wanting to do it forever. No more lines, he said. No more lines, I agreed. Just us together, finally honest about what we'd both wanted all along. And it turned out that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.